public disclosure and warning. This is not a loophole or get around the ATF laws video. This really isn't. I'm going to introduce something I didn't do in the previous take because I want to cover this quickly. Black powder weapons are legally listed even if they're made recently. If they're a pattern copy of a previous gun on purpose, usually labeled clearly which one it is. These weapons that can absolutely do just as much damage these days as any other pistol or rifle or shotgun are legal because they're black powder, muzzle loading, or whatever. They use some antiquated method. Usually they don't use cartridged ammunition. Now there's a specific area of this that's very interesting. And I'm going to bring up the Ethan Allen Pepper Box or Pieta or other brand 1851 navy, brass, or steel frame revolvers or pistols. They're sold for under $200 in some cases by themselves, and you can get one used if you look around. Now, some of you already know, but I'm going to bring this up really quickly. A revolver is based on a simple concept. It has a revolving set of chambers, usually 6 of them, with a 7th quasi-chamber in the middle that it spins on, that you can make by just getting metal tubing or even barrel liners for that size, and just weld them together. Or just buy a piece of metal and drill the holes. You just have to do it precisely. The welding method may be more precise. And it's not trivial, but it's actually bizarrely easy process of making a replacement cylinder for one. And it doesn't matter what it's designed for, because in the end, if you make it to where it can't blow apart and it can fire, 6 shots is better than a single shot in many cases. So here we go with the funny part about this. What's stopping a person from taking a cylinder which acts like 6 individual pistol cartridges glued to each other, because that cylinder in a black powder weapon has you put primers on one end and powder and then bullets in the other. It's like reloading 6 shells, but they're put together at the same time. What's stopping you from just getting another cylinder and swapping it in? Because most of them are designed as kits you buy. So by definition, you know how to take it apart and replace the cylinder. And quick change versions of this are very common because quick changing a black powder cylinder is considered acceptable behavior and is encouraged. It doesn't have to have a limitation on it that wasn't in place in the 1880s. Something made in 1880 or before that allowed you to swap out the cylinders would still be legal because it's considered antiquated. As long as it doesn't use, at the time you purchase it, or have the ability to use cartridged ammunition that is modern. If it uses ancient, old cartridges, it's not illegal. Even if you could technically chamber modern cartridges, like a 45, a good example is a 45 caliber pistol that was made at the time that used rimfire. If you just move the pin on the hammer to be center fire, you could put 45 Colt in it and it would fire just fine. And in most cases, because they're kind of weak cartridges anyway, you can just get away with doing that. Or you can just make it to where you swap out the cylinders and actually do black powder. This means you can hot load them if you want to, and you can get away with using smokeless powder in them because, legally speaking, what you do is only restricted based on you breaking a law. There's no law against doing something stupid like putting smokeless powder in a black powder weapon. It's dangerous unless you do exact tolerance testing. You have to do these things. And you can't really load it as blanks, empty charges with, you have to actually load something in there to get it to react, because modern smokeless powder does not go off correctly without something to push against, at least most of the time. There are variations of it, but let's go. So a DIY pistol, now again, you can just load it with black powder. It was used for hundreds of years, it works well. But you can load black powder weapon like this, and you can get a cartridge conversion consisting of pop, pull out, put in a new cylinder, pop. The conversion kits for them were available at the time, so you can buy antiquated design conversion kits that modernized it during the period of time. So now you can just pop out a cylinder. So now you can just load a bunch of them. You can buy cheap cylinders. You can get them. They're normally expensive, but you can actually buy them or make them by welding pieces of metal tubing together in exactly the same shape and just doing all the indexing, all the other stuff you have to do. Most of this is actually pretty easy to do if you're willing to make a gun. I mean, you'd be basically making a gun. But the funny part is all you have to do is make the cylinder. Every other part of it, including the hammer, can be converted rapidly to firing a pin using a firing pin. And I'm not joking about this. because you can just get a replacement hammer. Some of them will take a hammer from a later gun. So at this point, you're able to make one from scratch by copying it and just putting in the newer parts or just altering it. And according to the ATF, their rules are, as long as you don't resell it after you made these changes with the changes installed, it's okay. If you bought it as a black powder weapon, you have to sell it with the original parts. And that's it. And can you sell the conversion kit if somebody wants it? Yes, but you have to do it separately. There's no waiting period or something, but it has to be a separate sale. And you really don't want to do that because it shows intent to sell a weapon and trying to keep it from being trackable and whatever. And every city and county you're in state is going to be a different set of rules. This only applies on a national level. The ATF can't knock your door down. The DIY conversion cylinder can be made slightly longer and have less cylinder gap and have better pressure and also have the ability to tolerate more force. And there's no rule against relining the barrel or drilling out the whole damn thing and putting a new barrel in, or just using it as a template to build another gun entirely. And most of these are sold as kits, so you're looking at the diagram on how to build one. Just remake it. That sounds simpler than it really is. It's really a pain in the ass, but you can do this. You might have to file down the forcing cone on or the cylinder slightly. And to resell it, you'd have to put it back the way it was and sell it very much separately. Not on your honor, but really, not a wink and a nudge, really don't sell them as a collection of parts. But is this better than just buying an actual gun? Now, the reason people get guns like this is because they're not as subject to regulation ex post facto. Yes, a bunch of guns are grandfathered in. You could buy an old gun and it's grandfathered in. But somebody might decide, well, we don't like it because it's used in some armed robbery or a shooting, so we're going to ban it. I'm not kidding. And these are really hard to ban because, what, you had the last 100 years, 120 years, and you didn't ban them? Why is it suddenly more lethal? And again, they fire black powder. They will absolutely be useful in a self-defense situation if you really want one. Just buy one and make a copy of the whole thing. You have 12 shots. It's not as good as a magazine-fed auto reloading gun, I guess. But, I mean, if you want to make one, and you want to own one, you can. You can also just fire it one cylinder. Just never fire it and, just use it for shooting once in a while. 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine under Title 26 of CIADA as any other weapon for anything that isn't easily defined as a shotgun, rifle, or pistol, that's boring and standard and grandfathered in. These are ridiculously grandfathered in. That's why black powder weapons are allowed for this. And they were in existence at the time when conversion cylinders were available. So you just pop a pin, throw out the cylinder, put in another one. But I need to do all these alterations. No, you just load the cylinder outside of the gun and then pop it in. You don't have to do many alterations. And in fact, you can do modifications to the gun to where it'll hit and fire a center fire cartridge as well as a cap and ball. They do exist. They're just minimal conversion kits. They basically put up a fence where the hammer would hit and contain floating firing pins. It's a permanent modification. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, you can change it back. It's not really permanent if you can change it back. But it is not readily convertible to some sort of machine gun or anything like that. And it is non-semi-automatic. This makes it immune to most bans. And it's 6 shots. And these are like 45 caliber. And there's no mechanical limitation on the steel frame ones from you loading a 50 caliber cylinder in some of them and putting a 50 caliber barrel on it and firing Dirty Harry rounds if you want to. Or just rebuild it and then just make it slightly larger and do your own design. Now I'm going to get on to the next one. Powerhead. Shark and gator bangers and sticks. Any other weapon. AOW. Chamber only 0 barrel length guns exist because they have a 26-inch overall length and the last bit of them is just the chamber for a cartridge so it won't blow up outward, including 50 BMG, 12 gauge, 410, and 45 Colt, which are fairly compatible with each other, 45 Magnum, 7.62, 223, 38, 357 Magnum, 30-06, 22 caliber Magnum, and other. And, of course, for some reason, because I say so, 9 gauge. DIYing one. You can make one. And again, you can make a black powder shark killer. It uses a blank. A lot of them were designed to where, this is how this works. You have a 26-inch long stick with a metal pipe on the end of it. Let's say you muzzle load it because you're feeling dangerous. Or you just put a black powder charge in it and another pipe over the charge, and it's just 2 pipes. Yeah, we're doing the slam fire here, but it's important. That would actually work well, and you seal it up. The black powder blank, that could be like an inch long, expands in a ball of gas. It's gunpowder. It's not smokeless powder, so it doesn't need any projectile. In fact, a projectile will get in the way of you doing the dirty deed, hitting a shark or a gator in self-defense. This is because these animals are ridiculously overpowered. Like, seriously, they need to be nerfed from this server. And the other thing is, it's a legitimate, only example I can find of someone in the ATF actually using the expression for self-defense or self-defense weapon. They always talk about an exemption for sporting usage. So technically people hunted sharks and gators, so that's how they came up with the hunting exception or sporting exception. I guess this is sporting behavior, but it is a self-defense weapon. And you can watch videos of people actually shooting these things, or setting them off anyway, it's not really shooting anything, outside of water. Because they're designed to work in water, a non-compressible medium, these are ridiculously not safe to use outside of water, and in many states and counties and in some countries, it's immediately, you're in jail because you're endangering everybody within a block. I mean, this is not okay. Now, for the same reason, you can also buy a 5th Ops perimeter alarm, which is literally a street legal, unregistered non-gun that is essentially just a 12-gauge breech firing pin, but not a lower. Is this a gray area? No, because it doesn't include a barrel in that case. This one's a barrel with no lower. The entire lower is that long hunk of metal pipe or plastic pipe or fiberglass that they use to make it 26 inches long so it's not concealable. 1958, the U.S. government classed all of them, however, the power head on the end and the bar and stick version. Also another one that was just a hollow tube that you stuck on the end of your spear point and let the spear point act as a firing pin. They classed all of them firearm. Said they were the same as sawed-off shotguns and machine guns. Now, remember, sawed-off shotguns are smoothbore weapons that are too short of a barrel, under 18 inches. Illegal to possess or use without this exemption for sporting or whatever, but they could all be rendered legal if they were solidly attached to a shaft, making them 26 inches overall and, on purpose, smoothbore. Why? Because the smoothbore was the chamber. See also the ruling on a floating chamber that was obviously could be used as a shotgun shell holder and barrel. It had a forcing cone that was part of an actual shotgun. Bang sticks were used to shoot fish and gators. Power heads poke a spear through a fish was the original definition. Then somebody came up with a power head as a slip-on, no firing pin, made to use the tip of the spear shaft as a firing pin. No firing pin, not a firearm. After a bunch of that kind of juggling, they just said, okay, just put a 26-inch barrel extension on it body extension. So the body of the gun is bigger than the actual real business end of it. Screw-on type power heads containing a firing pin had to be still sold for legal reasons. It was the lawyer rule, with a welded-on steel shaft. Spot welding. It just had to be welded permanently, even if you could just twist it really hard and break it loose and get the threads cleaned up. After installing on the spear shaft permanently, they were then cut off the spot weld temporarily because they made it to where there was 2 ways of mounting it. Or you could take out the back of it and undo it, and it's now separate pieces to put together. And what you do in your own home is your own business. So, they still fall under the authority for the Gun Control Act 1968 on shipping and purchasing it to keep people from buying weapons to shoot presidents with. Except they're not. They're totally legal to ship because they're shipped as a device for this sort of thing. So, the rest of the rules below, but look up the Model 50 shotguns, floating chamber, and also look up all of the pepper box and other black powder weapons you can easily convert because it's totally legal. These rules are based on intent, behavior, and rulings that were done based on grandfathering in or practicality. And no, I couldn't find an incident of anybody using a shark blaster to actually shoot anybody. Or trip alarm. And I can't find any black powder incidences at all, at least in the last 50 years. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.